Once upon a track, in the heart of Hampshire's beautiful New Forest, there was a railway. It was a short but perfectly positioned railway that, like the branch of a tree, would quietly leave the busy main line at Brockenhurst and travel through the forest to Lymington Pier and to the sea. Now kept in the sidings at Brockenhurst station, with wonderful views across the forest, there was a train. She wasn't as glamorous as the steam engines that ran the line in the past, or as loved as the slam-door Lymington flyer, but she was a hard-working electric Dessie 450 unit that carried her passengers safely and was fondly known by everyone as Dessie. Bright and early, and as regular as clockwork, Morgan, the cheery train driver, would cycle through Brockenhurst village to the station. "Another beautiful day down south again, Dessie. It's going to be a cracker." He would keenly check the ROTA and prepare for their day's work. "Ooh, 2 boxes to collect from a fisherman in Lymington. How exciting! I wonder what they've caught." Morgan got into Dessie's cab. Jasminder, the guard, took her position and watched the excitement in the eyes of the passengers patiently waiting behind the yellow line on the platform as the doors released with a tsh. Gathering their belongings, one by one they carefully climbed aboard, found a seat, and as the clock ticked round to departure time, Dessie did her usual trick of easing out of platform 4 before anyone had really noticed. "Good morning, tickets please," said Jas, who started making her way down the first carriage. Peeling away from the main line, Dessie was glad to be underway once more and travelling across the ever-changing forest. Past the ponies and over the heathland, a smokeless train against a clear blue sky. Morgan waved to Mrs. Bracken, who was out for her morning walk. She loved everything in the New Forest, especially the Dartford warbler, the heather and purple moorgrass. "We're coming up to the footpath and Lymington town level crossing. Sound your horn, Dessie." They passed by the cars patiently waiting to cross and then slowly pulled into the station. "The fisherman's waiting for you at Lymington Pier, Morgan," said Fern, the station master. "Thanks, Fern. We'll be there in just a few minutes." "OK, Dessie, on to Lymington Pier and then we'll head back." They followed the curving track, out over the water, passing the brightly coloured fishing boats and yachts moored in the harbour. Quite a sight for all those sunning themselves on the quay. With a "mind the gap between the train and the platform" reminder, they pulled into Lymington Pier station, close to the Isle of Wight ferry. The ferry master, who was enjoying his morning toast, was pleased to see them and gave them a wave. The doors opened with a tsh, and Dessie watched the families wheel their cases excitedly towards the ferry terminal. With Dessie empty once more, Jas closed the doors and Morgan walked across to the fisherman, who had just flung open the doors of his van. With noisy seagulls swirling overhead, Morgan peered inside. There were 2 large boxes. The first was marked "dressed crab" and the second "peppered squid." "Lymington's finest spider crabs and squid, Morgan," shouted the fisherman. "They're London bound." Thanks," Morgan replied. "That's not quite what I was expecting." The crabs were red, alien-like, and the squid were fascinating with their elongated bodies, large eyes, arms and tentacles. The boxes were taken on board Dessie, and the waiting passengers were soon in their seats and peering out of the windows for their return journey. With a last glimpse of Lymington Quay, they headed slowly back along the scenic 5.5 miles of single track to Brockenhurst. As they pulled into Brockenhurst station, they could see Harry, the waiting London-bound train. Harry was named after Bearded Harry Brusher Mills, the famous snake catcher of Brockenhurst. As Dessie came to a standstill, Morgan watched the boxes being unloaded and transported to platform 2 via the station lift. Then, to his surprise, placed on board Harry's first-class carriage. Morgan rubbed his eyes and then rubbed them again as 2 familiar silhouettes took their seats at a first-class dining table. The crab was smartly dressed for dinner, and the squid kept juggling the pepper grinder between his arms and tentacles. "Ah, now I understand dressed crab and peppered squid," Morgan said to Jas. "Have a wonderful trip," Morgan shouted as Harry pulled out of the station and quickly disappeared into the distance. In a moment, all was still, and Morgan, Dessie and Jas were pleased of their break before the next trip to Lymington. "You know we've seen a new station today, Dessie," Morgan said with twinkling eyes. Dessie looked at him, most confused. "Crustacean!" Morgan laughed out loud, quite uncontrollably. Remembering the spider crab, Dessie rolled her eyes and let out a groan-worthy. When the day was done, Morgan and Dessie made their way back to the corner of the shed in the sidings. Dessie was always the first train back, and all was peaceful, just the sounds of birds roosting high up in the rafters. Morgan finished his end-of-day duties and then whispered, "Night, Dessie." He never got a reply. Dessie loved to sleep. And as no day was ever the same on the Brockenhurst to Lymington branch line, she was already dreaming about what might be on tomorrow's ROTA.